Just valuing, your time. We really appreciate you guys joining us once again. Good evening, and thank you for sharing your time with us for our last Connect series of the year, actually, for the 2015-2016 school year. My name is Raymond M. Griffin. I'll be facilitating this evening. I'm a third-year doctoral candidate at Michigan State University in Educational Administration, K-12. I'm co-chairing this event with a young lady who you just met, Carrie Gentner. She'll be working on the technical side tonight, and we really appreciate her assistance in this production. The Division A Graduate Student Committee, while we usually have it on screen, we don't have it tonight. It is composed of graduate students who are committed to PK through 12, educational leadership and its effects on student learning and life outcomes. We are also very deeply committed to disseminating knowledge and improving the capacity of the profession as we continue to enhance the public good. So please see the AERA Division A Facebook page for more events and details about what we do and where we're going to be going in the next few years. That's www.aeradivision.org. The Connect series that you guys are involved in tonight, it is a sequence of virtual real-time sessions on Google Hangout and YouTube on Monday evenings. Each virtual session is focused on a unique topic that's related to policy, organization, leadership practice, and preparation, and it also features a different set of folks every single Monday that we do this. And so the panelists include a combination of scholar practitioners, which you will get a chance to meet these great individuals in a few seconds, school leaders, as well as policymakers. We also invite graduate students and other community members to join in on our conversations as well. So our session tonight is titled Remembering Rural Schools. This session is going to investigate leadership practice and preparation issues that are unique to these particular schools in rural areas. And we'll also focus on the stereotypes, fiscal and policy constraints, and urbanization tensions that rural communities and educators face. So let's meet our panelists tonight. We have Dr. Terry Molesky. She is the superintendent at Menominee Area Public Schools, a district of about 1,500 students in 4 schools in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, a place that I've yet to go, but I'm looking forward to. We have Dr. Douglas Weiserick. He's an assistant professor at Iowa State University. His main research interests investigate teachers and principals, professional practices and contexts of standards and accountability, educators' reflective and collaborative practices, and the development of successful P through 20 school partnerships and learning communities. Welcome. We have Dr. Surface, Jean Surface. She is an assistant professor at the University of Nebraska, Omaha. She spent a great deal of time in rural school communities. She was superintendent for 2 years at the as an assistant superintendent for a year at Park County School District in Matisse, Wyoming. She was also a principal in Ogallala in Wakefield, Nebraska, and she was a teacher in Roseland, Nebraska. Dr. Surface has worked in Annenberg Rural Challenge and with the Rural Features Institute to improve rural student educational outcomes. Welcome. Carolyn Maynard, did I say that correctly?
Menard.
She's a PhD student at Iowa State University and an educator in Iowa's Boone Community School District. At Boone, she has served as high school assistant principal and middle school principal. She is now the director of special education there and principal of Lincoln and Page Elementary Schools. So welcome. We really appreciate you guys joining us today. I think we can get started since there are so many ideologies about what rural schools are and what they aren't, what they're made of and what they are not, where they may be, how specific locales are considered rural. I guess I'll start with Dr. Molesky. If you could talk about what a rural school is, and just describe the features of a rural school in the larger community and what makes it rural in a more general sense.
Well, I actually grew up in large urban areas, but have spent the last 40 plus years in school districts in the Upper Peninsula, and also spent 4 years in a rural district in the Lower Peninsula. So rural means different things to different people in Michigan anyway. Generally, rural in terms of the Upper Peninsula is the sparsity of the population. Am I having some bad feedback here?
I didn't hear you.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, there's a bit of background.
Okay, all right. I don't have anything on here. I just wondered. But anyway, from the standpoint of the district that I'm currently in, and I would probably speak for the whole Upper Peninsula, is the sparsity of population, the lack of more of an isolated demographics. Oh, I'll turn down my volume. Okay, thank you. Is that better?
That's better.
Okay, great, very good, thank you. So, for us in the UP, I think it has mainly to do with just the isolation and the sparsity of the population. In fact, one of our school districts at more the eastern end of the UP is actually the largest geographic school district in the west of the or east of the Mississippi. It actually covers 1,524 miles, which is roughly the size of Rhode Island. So you can imagine a lot of the challenges that they have with transportation, with you know, attracting and keeping staff and the services that are available. I think those are really the main things that I see in the area.
Ms. Menard, if you would like to hop in and just describe the rural community, the larger community, and the area of Iowa in which you're in, and what makes it rural.
Okay. Oh, I'm in a community school district. I'm going to turn the off. I'm talking here. Is this okay?
Go ahead.
Okay. So in Boone, Iowa, we're about 45 minutes away from Des Moines, which is a very urban area. And so Boone houses right now about 2,100 students in our district. And we have one high school, one middle school, a 2-floor building, and then 2 buildings that serve preschool and first grade that I oversee. One of the unique challenges about a rural school is that there are no extra personnel. So we don't have people that are HR directors. We don't have people that oversee those more, the PR. We as administrators do it all and wear multiple hats, and that makes it a challenge being in a rural district. One thing that we're challenged with is because we are rural, we are one of many communities in Iowa where we're in declining enrollment. The districts that are closer to those urban, larger school settings are in increasing enrollment. And so because of that, families are choosing to live near the larger city instead of the smaller towns. And because of that, then we're impacted by our declining enrollment. I've been administrator here for, I'm just finishing my 12th year, and every year I've been here, we have had a declining enrollment. So just to give you a little bit of a size, when I started as assistant principal, we had 950 kids in our high school, 912, and now we have 650.
Wow.
So that shows you in 12 years a difference in how that happens. And so what's really happened in part of our community is we have to work very closely with our Chamber of Commerce to do whatever we can to bring businesses to our community that bring young families. And that's a struggle right now because all of our families are going to outside areas where the jobs are. And that then puts this strain on us as rural principals and wearing multiple hats and having multiple management and leadership responsibilities.
Dr. Surface, is the same type of deal happening in Omaha, which is very close to Iowa.
Yes, I would say that's true. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, the same kind of thing is true. The families are living outside the community, they're commuting in. But one of the things I wanted to say in response to what was said is that all these rural by diversity, by landscape, sociologically, with religion, and by industry. That makes them all very, very unique. it brings in, it retains different sorts of people, it brings in different kinds of people, and it has a major impact in how we connect with our schools and in our leadership roles.
You were frozen for some reason. As we're trying to make sure that we have this technology together, there's still some feedback on the voices. We want to make sure that we clear that up so that the individuals who are in the audience, they can hear us. Make sure that you are putting in your questions on YouTube, and you can go to Twitter, and it's hashtag Division A Connect. Going back to the conversation, if we can start with you, Dr. Weiseret, if you can describe some of the stereotypes that rural school communities face, and sort of how some of these stereotypes are characterized in Iowa.
Well, I think some of the stereotypes, particularly in Iowa, are that rural schools offer very little as far as programs or diversity as far as communities, and generally rural schools are often positioned as lacking in significant resources in which to deliver programs to students into communities. One thing that I think is important here in the context of the state of Iowa is that there is a strong network among schools through the area education agencies, or AEAs, to deliver different types of services such as special education and professional development, in addition to supports from the state level around teacher leadership, and I would say at least a minimum a regional, if not a statewide, emphasis on the implementation of technology in classrooms, particularly using one-to-one technology, which many schools, if not the majority of school districts here, utilize one-to-one technology. So I think it's important to note that from not only my ongoing research, but in the networks that I've developed here in Iowa, that rural schools are excellent centers for innovation.
Oh my goodness.
And are pushing a lot of boundaries in their own schools in their own right that the broader community should definitely take note of.
Great stuff. Expound on one-to-one technology, if you will.
It looks different in each school. Very generally, one-to-one technology means that each student in a particular school, and granted, some schools are all one-to-one, some are implementing them at grade levels, and some are district-wide. Each school district, they're at different stages, but generally the district has purchased a device, either an iPad or a tablet or some other type of laptop technology that teachers integrate into their classrooms, content area classrooms, and the instruction takes place around these devices, really integrating across content areas, as well as building those connections with parents. So here in Iowa, it's been an emphasis and a source of investment for many school districts here.
Great, great. Dr. Molesky, would you like to chime in? And I would love to know if you guys are utilizing one-to-one technology in the UP and the Upper Peninsula, as well as sort of how you guys are navigating some of the challenges that Ms. Menard brought up earlier in terms of rural schools being thought of as less than and not providing the services that maybe some urban schools would provide.
No, and I would definitely agree with her that, we are in declining enrollment. Right now in Michigan anyway, at least from our perspective, we're really experiencing a teacher shortage in terms of math, science, and special education. So for us, it's harder to attract people who actually aren't from the UP, because the UP is a unique culture. But that can be a good thing because our teaching population tends to be very stable. These are people that choose to live in a rural area, even given the economic depression and the declining enrollment. So, like Carolyn was saying that, she wears a lot of hats, and it was interesting when she said that because I thought we don't even think twice about that anymore, and I'm sure you don't either. That's just a given that. I'm a former special ed teacher. I will be called to one of the elementaries to deal with a student with a meltdown, or I might serve lunch. I might supervise a playground. That's just become so commonplace, I think, for small rural schools that you really don't think about that. But on the other side of it, we do have. I know that when we go to the Lower Peninsula, most especially Grand Rapids, Detroit, or Lansing for conferences, I think people still think that we have a foot of snow on the ground in July, that we take dog sleds to work, and that we have outhouses and all those type of things. So that we all have a sense of humor up here, which is nice. But technology is definitely, especially for my district, that is just going to be the equalizer for us because in order to give our kids opportunities, they have access to the internet, they have access to the world. And so, that's the stance that we're taking is, looking for ways to, one of our neighboring districts just initiated a one-to-one initiative for their 712 students. The downside is they don't have any money built in for the teacher education side of it. So it's great to have technology. Here are all these Chromebooks, and our teachers, like I'm sure they are in most schools, and especially in rural schools, are they wear a lot of hats as well. So they work a full day now, expecting them to figure out technology, and getting professional development to our district is more problematic. But I will say that if you ask people in our area, they will say that the negative or the pluses outweigh the negatives. Because it is a sense of community that you have there. I mean, our school is the only polling place in the area. That's the center of everything. If you go to an event at our school, you will see a wide range of ages, from babies to people in their 90s, because that is the center of the community, is our school. And so you do have more of that sense of community, you have more of that support. And I think we're, like somebody else has said, that you're more innovative. I don't have to ask 20 people because I am the HR staff, so I don't have to go through committee after committee after committee. If someone brings me a good idea and I can find a way to fund it, we can just do it. So there are advantages to that, but on the other side, for Michigan anyway, the funding is the biggest sense of or inequality for us. It's a more cookie cutter that Michigan takes. Everybody gets 7,026, or maybe you get a bit more if you're an out of formula district. But looking at transportation, heating, and technology and other things, it's really not equitable. So I would say that's probably our biggest challenge, is to maintain and improve what we have, because you can't ask people to do more with less and for less for forever. And again, we're going to experience a huge teaching shortage because of that. So, all right.
Thank you, Dr. Gillespie, for that. I really appreciate that comprehensive response. Dr. Surface, if we can get you in here to sort of expound a little bit on, and I don't want to focus on the issues in teaching and learning, but if those are some of the things, especially after she just elucidated that you guys wear tons of hats and everything isn't as centralized, what specific pluses, why would you say that rural teachers commit to staying in classrooms in rural areas, other than a great sense of community, a sense of belonging, especially with the continuous, the numbers with students continuously depleting every year? What would you say? And I would like Dr. Surface to comment on this particular question.
So you're asking me why they stay. Why they stay, why are they attracted to rural schools? Well, you know, I think that I think it goes back to what Terry was talking about, and I think it's because they're homegrown. I think that's probably the most attractive piece. Um, I think that not having layers and layers and layers to make a difference for kids is very attractive to teachers. They know that they can make a difference in a very short time with curriculum. It's not something that, you know, they can implement a new science curriculum and they can see they can reap the rewards within a year because it reaches so many kids so fast. I have talked to a lot of kids that were graduates of rural communities, and they say that you know, teachers felt like family. Teachers knew us well. They worked very closely with us. They knew if we understood something and when we did not understand something. Small schools can make changes very quickly. They knew their families. All those kinds of things. Those are the kinds of things that attract teachers. Those are the kinds of things that keep kids in communities. It's that sort of sense of family, I think.
Carolyn, would you like to hop in on that and talk about maybe the opposite? What sort of issues or teaching and learning issues may flag rural schools that may not necessarily flag urban schools as much?
I guess I'm going to tag in on the conversation regarding the one-to-one because having our students, our district, we are one-to-one grades 2 through 12. Our students in 5th grade start taking the computer home. Our 2nd, 3rd, and 4th graders just keep them in the building. And actually, as of next year, we'll be one-to-one preschool through 12th grade as I'm finishing purchasing new equipment for those kiddos. And so, quite frankly, because we do have that technology and we were able to implement a teacher plan, like Terry had talked about, that you have to have the professional development behind it to train the teachers, because we were able to do that, we really feel we have a good ground, you know, good base to continue growing with the students. But with that, you know, technology is that it's a device, and we don't want to have it be a glorified worksheet. We want it to be innovative and to enhance our students' learning, and that's really where it taps in those rural schools to give those experiences to those kids that maybe those urban students may have at their fingertips and just outside in their environment, where rural schools need to tap in with using technology. I will piggyback on other comments. The sense of belonging, the sense of family, the sense of community is key. Everywhere I go in town, everybody knows me. Now, there can be a disadvantage for some people like that too. But it's all in how you look at it. But as an administrator, you are watched 24/7. You have to be mindful about what you wear when. I'm very cognizant of when I dress up and when I dress down, when I'm being seen as a mom versus as a principal, even though they always see you as an administrator. But and so I really feel that people come to the rural districts because it is a family feel. We all celebrate together. We all work through struggles together, whether it's personal struggles with our family or whether it's struggles we have in our community or with our district. We all are just this big sense of family and belonging. And I couldn't imagine my life working in any other type of district but rural because of that. And I really agree with the fact that there's a lot of less red tape, I guess you want to call it, and less processes. There is a process. I think it's important that we still want to have a systematic process in how we organize our structures. So there's cohesiveness between a preschool through 12 education, but within it, when there's only 4 or 5 administrators, you can agree amongst the table, make some decisions really quick instead of going through a 2-week process. And so there are those advantages, just like Terry said, that if you have an idea that someone came up with and you can find a way to make it happen, you'll make it happen if it's what's best for students. So I really see that I really don't see any downfalls to being in the rural in the sense of where I'm particularly living. But I also know that there's some people that are so remote and so rural. I'm not speaking on behalf of them because I haven't experienced that. You know, I'm in a rural setting, but I'm still an hour away from a busy life, you know, from Des Moines, from where I can access. I'm 15 minutes away from Iowa State University. That's what's very attractive for our community because we have a 2-year, very strong 2-year college in our town, and we have a 4-year university 15 minutes away, and we have then a big community an hour away. So Boone is a very attractive town in that sense because we can have that small time feel, but we can get away and have those opportunities elsewhere if we want, outside of our job in our community.
Did anyone comment? Go ahead.
I didn't hear you.
I thought someone else was speaking when I was. I guess that's just feedback on my end. But I was asking if anyone wanted to comment on what Carolyn was just talking about.
I would like to on a couple of things. First of all, I want to piggyback on what she said about technology. One of the things that living in the Omaha area that I've heard from school administrators is that technology is really not very flexible. And I can tell you from my experiences in rural school, it can be very, very flexible. I had a daughter that took 28 credit hours via technology before she got out of high school. It is very flexible, and it's because teachers are very flexible. School administrators are very flexible. It works. And the other piece of information that I'd like to share is that when I was a superintendent in Park County, Wyoming, which is right next to Yellowstone Park, I was 4 hours from Billings, Montana, which was the next largest town. And besides being absolutely beautiful, it was very, very rural, very remote. I had 6 bus routes going in 6 different directions on mountain roads. We had students that drove 20 miles to get to the bus route. So very, very remote, 140 students, K-12. But it was the amazing, best experience I've ever had in my life. It was a family, very, very small family, and the students that were there, again, it was that very close-knit family feel. And the students knew their teachers, the teachers knew the families. No one fell through the cracks.
Mm-hmm. And I would like to just comment that there still is the old-fashioned, at least in our area, value system where I'm not a teacher, I'm a school teacher. And the level of respect that I see in Michigan, I don't know if you've read anything about what's going on in our state, there's a lot of disrespect toward teachers, toward educators in general that, you know, we have 3 months off, we don't work hard enough, our test scores are horrible, you know, on and on. But in an area, you know, that I'm in, such as Menominee, and I would say that's pretty true throughout not just the UP, but rural Lower Peninsula, it's just the respect people have for you being an educator. It really means everything that their child has a quality education, that you care about them, that you know them, you know their families, you go the extra mile. And it is interesting when you do go out to a grocery shop or go to a ball game or whatever, people are very very careful about making sure that they're polite, they're respectful. Even my former students from 40 years ago, they still, you know, call me Mrs. Molesky, and they want to introduce me to their families and, you know, catch me up on what they've been doing. So that level of respect, I think, just talking to some of my colleagues in more urban areas, you know, our biggest issue, we kind of laugh in our area, is teachers complaining because a student hasn't brought a pencil to class, or they're chewing gum again, or they won't take their hat off. But our students don't go through any kind of security. If somebody comes to our door, I mean, we do have a security system. we just know who everybody is, and there's just that trust and that feeling of safety and security, I think, that just adds to that more positive learning environment.
I have to say something funny. When I when I was doing some interviews last summer from some rural teachers, they talked about students came in from the playground and said, oh, they said the S word.
Oh.
And the teacher said, well, what was the what happened? What was the fight about? And what did they say? And they said, shut up. That was the S word. That one left an impression on me. Shut
Yeah,
up.
that one is pretty funny. I was thinking that they were saying something else, but
I know, so did we.
Yeah.
Raymond, I wanted to add one more thing because we were talking earlier when you introduced, you were sharing how you're in the Ed Leadership Program.
yes.
Another interesting phenomena that I'm noticing in my research, but also noticing personally with colleagues, is we have hired several colleagues as administrators that maybe have been an assistant principal in an urban setting and then have shifted to a rural principal, a head principal in a rural setting. And I will say there is a huge learning curve. Because when they were an assistant principal or an administrator in some capacity, maybe they had just a small piece of the pie that they were responsible for.
Right.
So when they transition, they find themselves, I don't know how to deal with that because that was never my role or responsibility. And when they come to a rural setting, it's all of your responsibility, and it's all of the expectation is that you are overseeing all of that. And so that is a huge learning curve, and I'm a mentor right now to 3 rural principals, and that is one thing that I've heard over and over is they wish they had more training and more understanding coming from an urban setting to a rural setting and that difference. So I think that was just something to note because we don't see that very often. Sometimes people choose that rural setting right away, but we do have some, I went right away to the rural setting, but we do have some that they really find that's a hard transition.
Very, very, very important point. We want to remind individuals to tweet us on Twitter at #DivisionAConnect for more questions for the panelists. But I wanted to figure out, Carolyn, from you really quickly before we got Dr. Weiserek back in here, like what were some of those things when you talked about the learning curve? Specifically, what were some of the things that they were struggling with?
Special education is probably the biggest area I find. I'm special education director. We have about 360 IEPs that I oversee. We have a very high percentage of special education in our district, and I'm a former special educator before I became administrator. And one thing that I learned is that when principals have come from an urban setting, perhaps they weren't that person that was working with the special education population.
Gotcha.
They were overseeing curriculum and assessment, or maybe they were overseeing half of the student alphabet and they were doing discipline. The aspect of special education, for most administrators, would probably tell you that they probably spend 60 to 70% of their day on special education. I'd be surprised if I hear people tell me differently because that is what really overcompasses our role. And so from a person who comes from an urban setting who hasn't had maybe, aside from the training in Iowa, we have to have 400 hours working in special education before they get their principal license. But that can be in multiple capacities. It could be sitting in IEP meetings. It could be working with the principal and looking at schedules for special ed or whatever. But really living it and dealing with the intricacies, the family involvement or lack of family involvement at times, and those needs and very unique challenges that we all have. That is something that I find is an area that we need to build stronger administrators with to understand. And that's the fastest way for you to get in trouble as a district. Students with disabilities have more rights than any other students, and whether we like it or not, that's how it is. And and they should, because we need to level the playing field to support them educationally. And I am extremely passionate about students with disabilities. And if the administrator coming in doesn't come from that understanding, then that can be a difficult transition for them to work on behalf of that student.
Gotcha.
That's a great point. That's outstanding.
Yeah. Dr. Weiserek, can we get you in here? Did you want to make any comments on what Carolyn just got done talking about? and certain phenomena that you've possibly seen around either students with disabilities?
I think it's just I have a general comment that may speak to all of the participants' more recent comments, is that rural districts are they have an increased burden to ensure that they are increasing capacity among their teachers and staff members, particularly around things like professional development. I mean, we've been talking about the administrators wearing multiple hats. I would probably make the case that the teachers are also wearing multiple hats.
Mm-hmm.
And where in maybe some larger, either even suburban or urban districts, schools have more human resources. They have more people available, so it's much easier. For example, I mean, maybe easier is not the correct word, but it may be more accessible to develop things like professional learning communities. For example, there's greater capacity and more numbers, whereas in smaller schools, there may be a grade level of 2 teachers or 3 teachers. So developing, grade level teams is more difficult. So just, I think on the whole, it could be, it can be a strength where smaller schools have probably increased communication amongst the groups of teachers. There's probably less segmentation amongst teachers. But at the same time, administrators really have to be aware of and conscious to develop their teachers in ways so they can address things like special education, co-teaching, teaming. They have to wear multiple hats as well.
And I would love for one of the panelists to sort of piggyback on what he's saying, to describe what that looks like in your particular county or in your particular city, city or rural area, on what teacher development may look like for new teachers coming in to rural schools. What does that development look like, whether it be around technology, whether it be around any other form of curriculum, and helping them stay on task with special development and other things that may be happening to make sure that they get the most out of the students that they're serving?
I guess I could start with that, is that it is more difficult, and this is probably true throughout all schools, is just finding time to collaborate. In Michigan, we have to have 180 days starting next year and 1,098 hours. And so, our district in particular has been through a deficit elimination plan. We're getting to the plus side, but that means that our teachers have had a 5% salary reduction. Their steps have been frozen. I give them kudos for hanging in there, for really being the stabilizing force in the district. I'm actually the 6th superintendent in 8 or 9 years. And our administration has really been more of a revolving door. So our teaching population is actually the stable population of the district. But what we're doing is we've made the shift, and I will, my capstone project for Michigan State had to do with current practices and professional development in my district, and then we had 3 other schools that we studied. But it's really going to be true throughout the state of Michigan, maybe beyond. But it's making this teacher-driven. That was the one thing that I noticed with this district, is the empowerment of teachers, and especially in a rural area where they feel like we don't get adequate funding. They feel like the state doesn't really listen to what our needs are. In fact, I'm convinced in Michigan that if we all packed up and went home, that the state probably wouldn't even blink an eye over it, because we're expensive to educate. But on the other side of it, our teachers have, if we give them the opportunities, which we feel that we're doing now with a more cohesive, innovative professional development plan that is teacher-driven, I think that's one thing that in a short period of time, we've been able to have a huge impact on staff morale, attitudes toward collaboration, attitudes toward, comprehensive PD plan. And so I think but again, I can do that. I lead this professional development in my district just because we don't have a curriculum director. Because our principals spend 95% of their time with probably 5% of the population. And we're trying to make changes in that. And I see Carolyn shaking her head because I'm a former special ed teacher as well. And that is occupies a huge amount of our time is special education. But I think, again, these are all things that I feel more of a sense of teamwork with the principals and with our teachers, with our parapros. People have access to me. They have access to the principals. And you know, in time we'll figure it out. If the governor would send us a few more dollars, we could probably figure it out faster. But you know, we'll continue to plug along and make it work because that is one thing that I would say the majority, if not all of our staff, is geared toward doing what's best for kids, and that's the purpose of us being here. And I don't know if you get that in a huge urban area where you feel like you're just a cog in the wheel. You know, I don't know. I guess that depends on what kind of environment your leadership has provided you for that.
Dr. Molesky, that's a really good point. I think it's a great segue to the next question that I would like to pose around. There's research that talks about this tension that exists within rural school communities in developing students for a prosperous future, particularly within rural communities. And we've been talking about how these environments, rural environments, are very homegrown, right? And so individuals are coming back and they're working in these communities. How is that done? And do you guys, within your particular counties and communities, do you see this being a tension, overarching tension of preparing the students that you have in your classrooms in your schools right now to come back into rural communities and then be viable citizens within those particular communities? Because I can imagine there are tons of options wanting to get away from a rural community to go to an urban community. How do you see that impacting them in education?
Well, I guess I'll just jump in for about 30 seconds here. That's been a real disconnect between our school and our business and industry in our area. We actually have a pretty solid manufacturing base, but we have students who don't even know what their parents do at the jobs that they go to. And you know, with the emphasis in Michigan on college as opposed to career technical education, we're seeing that we're really doing our students a disservice by saying if you don't go to college, you can't lead a happy, fulfilled life. And what we're seeing now is I met with Marinette Marine, which is a large shipbuilder in our area. You know, like they're saying right now, they predict next year that there's going to be 200,000 jobs in manufacturing. That right now they only have 10,000 people to fill those. So it's partnering. I'm reaching out as well as our career technical person to reach out to business and industry. They want to work with us. They want to keep these kids home. They want to give them a good standard of living. But that disconnect between home or between school and the community is something that I think for us anyway we have to really work hard to overcome.
And I'll piggyback on that. In our community, we do have we've got a pretty strong working relationship with the school districts and the community and the businesses. But we too in Iowa have the same push that Michigan is, where we are telling our students you are all college. We're expecting you to all go to college, and yet we know we have a certain pocket of students that their goal is to do blue collar work, and they want to be in that field, and their dad did it, and their dad's an electrician and they want to be an electrician. And so we have worked very hard to bridge those relationships. We actually have a partnership, a new program actually that we tapped in from a larger district, that we are using that model and creating these internships with our students during their senior year to bridge that gap, to help get them the opportunity. I have one student in mind I can think about a special education student that he just had to find his passion and his niche, and he found it in one of our businesses, Kruk, that does heating and cooling. And they brought, he got hired when he was a junior and kept him under his wing. And they said, if you continue with us, we'll pay for your license and you'll be guaranteed to have a job with us. And he now is in his second year of employment and thrives. And in fact, we just built a brand new high school, and he was on the team building the high school. So that was really neat to see that we had that opportunity. But we are very fortunate in Boone, where we have DMAC, the Des Moines Area Community College. And DMAC is in our back door. Literally, we have the college campus here in Boone, and it's where all the athletes come for that to a school. And so we do have the opportunity where DMAC teachers, as well as our Boone teachers, work respectively with college credit, and we are able to award a lot of college credit. Earlier, that was mentioned with, I think they said their daughter had. I think it was Jean who you had said your daughter had earned a lot of college credit. We have that as well, because the goal for the state of Iowa is that we graduate students with 2 years of college under their belt already before they actually go off after they graduate. So we know that's the goal, but at the same time, we're trying to balance that with our student population. We get $6,033 per student in Iowa. And so every student counts. And when we are in declining enrollment, that is what keeps us going. And so when the State Department cuts our funding, that's a travesty, because then we can't keep those types of programs to help bridge those kids into those right fields in the same capacity that we'd like. And I wear another hat. I'm a licensed superintendent as well. And so I kind of have a systematic approach in thinking. And when we look at our community as a whole and how we can benefit our students, when we do what we're doing with the state of Iowa legislatively, it's just a travesty for our kids, because it really throws our programs out the window that we have great ideas for, and we have people who can partner with us. Then we need to have the dollars to support that.
One of the things that I've always thought about with this is that I think you do both. I think that you teach them a love of place, but you also you teach them to love where they're at, but you give them wings and let them decide. You some will come back, others won't. Some will stay in the community, some will leave. One of the things that we're finding in very small census areas right now is that there are 30 to 45-year-olds who have decided to come back home.
Yeah.
That's a nice problem to have. We hope it continues across the country. But these people are saying, I want to be able to let my kid ride their bike to the pool.
Yeah.
Because where they're at, they can't do that. And so they want to make home in a small community. So we hope that continues. The other piece that I want to talk about just briefly is the Alaskan Systemic Initiative. Ray Barnhart talks about native ways of knowing, and he talks about how there's this native knowing stream that's integrated with the Western knowledge stream, and they're making sure that the two are equally important so that students are equally educated to both locally and through this Western stream of knowledge. And in some ways, I think we can do that same balance with a sense of place locally and preparing students for college, combining place-based learning with a sense of the standards and assessments that we do.
Comment on this question before I move to the last question for us?
I think again, echoing the comments of the others, in Iowa, I know that the state ed and the governor's office has encouraged a lot of resource sharing So you'll see a lot of rural areas sharing superintendents or curriculum directors or special ed directors. And so the loss of enrollment is affecting rural communities in significant ways. And going back to, I'm not sure who said it earlier, but then you're also getting into problems with communities losing their identity around their own school. And those are very tough conversations to have. And I know a lot of rural schools here in Iowa are having very tough conversations and will continue to do so for the foreseeable future because of that demographic shift.
But I do think that you're 100% right that nobody really cares if you share business services or a food service director, but you're 100% right that we've got to look for ways to share our resources with neighboring school districts without losing our identity, because that is the big thing that people worry about. I've been in several districts where there's been a consolidation, and there was just no choice. I mean, enrollment has dropped so significantly that you can't offer a complete program. And so it's not that you want to do it, but you have to do it. Otherwise, there will be no school. Those kids then will have to go 25, 30, 35 or more miles to the nearest school. But I think if we do get creative, if we do look at, like I will tell our neighboring schools that we don't need to make money, but we can't lose money on it. And I know they all are in the same boat. So rather than fighting for schools, we have schools of choice in Michigan. I personally don't care where a student goes. If they feel more comfortable in a neighboring district, it's all about where they feel like they're going to get the best education. But on the other hand, if we can share some of our resources so we can all thrive rather than survive, then that's what we need to do. And that's really, again, what's best for students and what's best for keeping our schools more vibrant.
Lastly, I have a question here that talks about the improvement of rural schools in practice. And so thinking about critical leadership, a place and what that means, but also in terms of funding. We've really talked about how individuals on this panel have served in many different capacities, teachers as well, wearing many different hats, and within that, each year you're declining in the enrollment of students. We just heard Dr. Molesky talk about students having the ability to go to whatever schools they feel are going to serve them best. And so you have a lot of private leadership preparation operators out there, such as Teach for America, and there are a few others, but they put a great deal of funding into places like Appalachian and the Rio Grande Valley to prepare current and future leaders for rural school leadership. And so from you guys, I would love to get what a few of your main training areas of practice that you believe that these programs can prepare current and future leaders for in rural schools. That would be great to sort of leave our audience with, so that future educators who are watching them, homegrown folks who desire to go back into rural areas that they may be from, they'll have some tools to take with them. Start with anybody, just 1 to 2 major areas that you believe that these particular programs, like Teach for America, when preparing rural school leaders, what are some of the focuses that they need coming in?
I think 2 things. First of all, I think that they need to be able to see that schools are the centers of communities. They need to be able to help the community wrap around the school and the school wrap around the community and help the two work together. The other thing that I think that is absolutely critical is to turn around that denigration that is happening toward rural schools and communities. And I think that we all need that. I think we need 5 or 6 talking points that when we hear those nasty comments about bigger is better, and they're coming from a hick town, all of those kinds of things. We need 4 or 5 or 6 talking points about why rural schools are good, why rural communities are wonderful places to live, why those comments are incorrect. We need to refute them. We should not let those pass.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would agree. If we're not our own cheerleaders, no one's going to be for us.
Right.
And the fact of the matter is that we have the data to back it up that our children are doing well, and they're doing well because there's that more uh, intangible quality of how kids feel about being welcome at school. Kids need to feel that they're welcome. They need to feel their teacher likes them. They need to feel they belong there. And
it's the
you can't
engagement.
necessarily get that I went to a high school myself that had almost 3,000 students.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you more than a half dozen people that I remember from those days, and that was kind of a blur. But we still have in our community, we still have probably, I would say, at least 40 to 50% who chose to come back because they wanted that same experience for their children that they had as children, for some of the same things that you said, Jean, about going to ride your bike to the pool and feeling safe, that the environment is not a scary place to be. So I think a part of it is we just need to be our own cheerleaders, and we don't need to apologize for that. Oh, I'm from a little town in the UP. We have kids that go to Big Ten schools. We have kids who go to Harvard. We have kids, but I don't think we necessarily celebrate our accomplishments or our triumphs in like we should. I guess we don't brag as much as we should, because I think that's part of what you're saying, Jean.
Two takeaways I would say for training you were asking about 2 things that we can give guidance for new administrators going into rural settings. One thing I would say is get to know the community and your stakeholders. Yeah. And build relationships with them, because you need to know who you're working for and who you're working with. And so it's those relationships and having those key relationships, which has been mentioned by the other 2. And the other thing I think that rural principals need more work on is managing and prioritizing tasks that are going to be of nature, because they do wear so many things. One of my mentors, I always said, how do I balance all of this? And he said, you don't, you blend it. Learn to blend your roles and responsibilities. Don't try and balance, because you'll never win and you're going to topple over, but learn how to blend. And so but it's very difficult to think about how you do that, because it really blends how our personality is and how we manage. But I found that people who are very organized and know how to manage tasks have been more successful than others who haven't. And then also in tying those relationships and having good communication skills.
And don't you think that people really need to want to be there? I mean, I've worked with principals who have come from larger school districts, and they don't want to let go of their larger district. Well, when I was here, this is what we had, and I think that really is something that that if you're going to come to a community, you have to adapt to them. They don't need to adapt to you, and I think what you're saying is 100% right on target there.
You need to embrace that. Yep.
Yeah.
Oh, just real brief. I know we're wrapping up. I just want to say that rural schools, I find, are very independent, and they want to know that it's not just about test scores. So make sure that you are addressing the needs of our community, you're addressing the interests and the needs of our students, and that you're going to be listening to parents as partners in the education of their children. And those are probably the three foundational things that I find in rural schools to be very unique.
Oh, that's a great point.
And you go to a few basketball games.
Yeah, More than a few.
Yeah.
You're everywhere.
Yeah.
And I'll just talk about really quickly some of the main points, but just how much I really enjoyed this conversation. You never know what you're going to get, the wealth of knowledge that you're going to get from these type of forums, and I think you guys have all nailed it in terms of advice, in terms of really being vulnerable and stating some of the things that maybe sort of flagging rural schools, and some things that you guys can be working on, but also the positives. That's what I got from this, more so than anything. And I think that when folks go back and watch this particular broadcast, I think they'll get a real sense of what actually goes on, in rural schools, and not necessarily the denigration and vilification that was spoken about earlier. But just to wrap it up, I'll just talk about a few things that I heard. And so rural schools do more with less, right? And so there's less red tape. There's a huge impact on one-to-one technology. Folks are not just teachers. They're not just educators. They're school teachers. There's a difference in how they sort of navigate that particular terrain. They're seen as prominent public figures at rural schools. It's college focused, but can also provide a bridge for students who may not want to go to college or may not desire to take that route. That's something that rural schools can be working on and do better. Although there's a declining enrollment, working with community stakeholders who are there to help bring those students back, or figure out more ways to make funding more equitable in those spaces. Even though situations may seem very bleak at times. Rural schools are the centers of their communities. And going back to this whole denigration point, rural schools matter, right? And so that's a new hashtag that we can create from this conversation to get that out there, that there's a sense of belonging. There's value in safety and coming back into a community and willing to have parents that are okay with having their kids ride their bikes down the street without having to worry about if anything is going to happen to them. It's the safety of that community. And then rural schools being very unapologetic, right, about what's going on in their communities, and being proud, and being, not necessarily just proud, but, making it sort of a national impact, and putting this out there so that individuals really know what's going on, not being ashamed of it. Teachers and administrators wear many hats, both all stakeholders. I can imagine that parents wear many hats as well in that particular space. But for urban principals or anybody else that may be coming from other areas other than rural, there's a steep learning curve in many cases, right? And so for folks to take that away, to really be prepared when they go into rural spaces, especially around special education and some other areas, there's a sense of place. They pool resources, knowing of your community, learn how to blend your roles, not necessarily balance them. I've heard so many great points. We've heard from 4 powerful leaders who are doing this work amazingly in a very robust and comprehensive manner, and we really do, from the bottom of our hearts, at the AERA Division A Graduate Student Committee, we really do appreciate all of the efforts, and we really appreciate all of the things that you guys are doing in the communities, as well as in your respective workplaces. And so we thank you from the bottom of our hearts for taking our invitation and running with it. And so I just wanted to make those points. We love you guys, and thank you so much.
And if anybody ever wants to visit DUP or stop by.
Thank you.
So we really appreciate you guys. We don't have any more AERA Division A Connect series events this year. We'll be starting up again in September. And so we'll definitely send out a calendar to all of our participants, just so you guys can chime in if you would like. So we really appreciate that once again.
It's nice meeting everyone. Thank you.
You too. Good luck.
So